Hello and welcome to this level 3 introduction video. My name is Allie with Amory Speaks, and this video is part of my energetic system series. So if you are new here, you're welcome to listen to this quick little intro video. I'm kind of going to just go through some bullet points of topics that I will be branching out into for level 3. So feel free to catch up on levels 1 and 2 in your own time if these things intrigue you. Know that there is a lot of foundational understandings, basic templates that I have talked about already that will be really helpful to people to understand more clearly what I'm talking about. So if this kind of work interests you and you haven't seen those, then definitely I would suggest taking a look at them. For now, for this video, I would like to introduce the topic of inner systems. We have already kind of cleared the ground around systems, and just in case people are new, I'll say, for me and this series and what I'm presenting here with energetic systems, it's an attempt at redefining the word systems, because a lot of times we have a lot of assumptions and preconceived conceptions about what a system really is, and that really has to have a function within industry, business, other people, or perhaps some people in a more biological realm will have a slight idea of inner systems, but it will be specifically about anatomy and physiology, most likely. Mechanisms and functions, channels, pathways, hormones, chemicals, proteins, all those kind of things. And yeah, those are all workers of systems in certain levels and layers. But for this basic understanding, and for us as humans to really start to get a grasp of what we're here to do, seeing the common links between all of the different transactions that happen, and calling them systems, energetic exchanges of sorts. It doesn't matter what kind of information, data, sensory input, firing of neurons, or whatever way that you want to term that you want to use to describe certain things. The fact is, and the commonality is, there's a communication or transaction happening of some sort, right? It's an exchange of energy, thought energy, or of electrical energy, magnetic energy. There's, just trying to broaden people's view here so we could really understand the great variability that I'm attempting to sort of provide an overview, bird's eye kind of perspective on with this energetic series. So yeah, all of those kinds of systems, all systems function in the same ways. We talked a bit about the tool of the torus and how that processes, manages, maintains, stores, and utilizes energy for us. And also how the torus is a multi-tool. It has the capability and the function to have specific heads on this tool, adapters put onto it to do different types of jobs in different layers of working. And also about the torus here, the fact that the torus itself is a template, and it is not just a tool, but also an embodiment of consciousness, a layer of reality that a creator consciousness will inhabit and be a part of. It has a purpose, right? That's what I'm trying to say. That the tool and the workings have a greater purpose, that the observer or creator consciousness, or your higher self, God, source, whatever you want to look at this as, they know that purpose. And they choose the perspective specifically for that definitive purpose that can only be attained and discovered and examined in that certain level. So yeah, it's a lot of generalities, and I've gone into a lot of that in depth in probably 20 videos or so that I broke all that down. So know that there's a lot of material there. Don't feel overwhelmed. Just take the bits for now that you can and go back to other videos later. And you'll be surprised at what bits have settled and made connections for you, and what you can draw together and really outline for yourself, and make those conclusions for yourself in your own reality. And so yeah, that's kind of my purpose for why I'm doing this series. That's where we're at right now, as a little catch up for people or new people. Level 3 is going to be about the inner systems. I'm not going to get into my whole spiel about why I feel inner systems are a place to start at. You know, I've really gone over that in level 1 and 2, and I feel like I really made myself clear with that. So I'm going to try to just jump in and share my screen here, and we will talk about these points that we're going to cover in depth for level 3. So at the top we have examples of inner systems. And now this is the type of work, or the layer in which work is done. You know, when we're talking about, okay, it's an energy exchanges, energy processing, that's what the Torus tool is doing. That's what all of our systems' main goal, you know, its priority list, its prerogative or whatever, is to balance and move through energy. Now, energy in itself is a wide umbrella term that I am choosing to use it as here in this series. And what do I mean? Let's talk about some of these things that I have at the top here. And this is versions of different types of information, input, you know. So we have etheric, which has to do with, you know, the astral realm, your astral body, spirit. There's a whole layer of systems and transactions and exchanges that your body and your reality is a part of, that is just etheric, that is this etheric layer. And yeah, all these layers interconnect, and I liked this picture that sort of shows like an intranet network kind of image, because yeah, we are organic intranet. We are original networking. You know, those ideas, those models of sharing information through the internet, through computers, and that is a inversion and a reflection of the original organic modeling that we're all a part of, that we're all birthed into. And it has so many layers, right? And these are not all the layers either, and I'll say that here quickly. This is just, you know, me grabbing at the lowest hanging fruit to make a quick infographic to help people kind of get the grasp of themselves. Feel free to not like words, or to add your own, or to want to dissect that word into something smaller, more specific. You know, this is just a beginner's starting ground for people. So we have etheric systems that do interactions. We have electrical systems. And electrical, think of simply, if you've ever gone and had a listen to a heartbeat, you know, or you've ever been pregnant and listened to the baby's heartbeat, or you've ever had an EEG, something wrong with your heart, EKG maybe. Those electronic impulses, you know, the firings, those all have a layer all of their own. And magnetic as well. And a lot of times it gets electromagnetic, it's jammed together, and they work beautifully together. And I talked a lot about that with the sacred union of the Torus being electromagnetic workings of masculine and feminine. So if that interests you, you can go back to those videos on dissecting the Torus and hear me talk and compare what those workings are all about and what they birth together. The communication, the Mobius flow, the lemniscatic recycling of the figure eight that is created, the energy, whatever. I don't want to get too backtracking. But yes, so we have, all of these layers: sensory, information, cymatic, right? Frequencies. We are structured water. Remember, our cells receive and speak on many levels and languages that our conscious first person reality here doesn't even grasp the concept of what a cell could talk to each other with. But they clearly do. They most certainly have great communications. Um, so I'm leaving the book open, but I'm just offering different terms here. Intuitive, emotional, all of these layers are things you can build and explore for yourself. Allow them to take shapes and form, and see what they bring for you when you allow to really hear and listen to those levels, all the different levels. And yeah, they are kind of all talking together, and they are kind of all like this with intermingling passings between. And you'll notice maybe some have traffic, maybe some are jammed, maybe some are clogged on purpose, maybe some you've kind of cut the road off and you don't want to go down there. And maybe you've got to do some exercise in neuroplasticity if you like that jargon, and you're more in the scientific realm, but just thinking differently, teaching an old dog new tricks, right? It is possible. It just takes the will, effort, dedication, the love and attention to do it. And so where better to start with yourself, right? Because, and this is, I'm not going to get too far into it, but this is why inner systems are so important, right? Because when we turn the lens inwards and we first examine all of these levels of communication, and we do that kind of digging for ourselves, we find where we have some traffic jams. We find where maybe the roads weren't designed that greatly, or maybe we've made shortcuts that aren't actually beneficial to the overall functioning, right? Maybe we could see that and clear those things up. When it's ourself on the line, when we are focused inwards on our own best, highest good, it kind of comes naturally for most people to want their best for themselves, to want what feels good, what is positive, what's going to lead to their success, their overall benefit, their health and wellness, right? To living happy, healthy lives. So when we learn first the troubleshooting techniques with that in mind for ourselves, we can work for harmonious solutions much better. We can have empathy for shadow much better. We can look at those harder parts of ourselves that maybe we're embarrassed of or shameful or we don't like or we feel like we want to change. We can look at them with more compassion. We can learn to love them as they are first. Easier, with more fluidity and more connectivity, with more realness, more spirit in there, more love in there. Because it's you on the line. It's your life. It's very real for you, and you feel the tangible changes. You will notice those clear ups of the traffic jams. They will make impactful changes in your day-to-day life. Very simple, as in I'll give a 3D example of traffic jam changes with and I kind of left off the inner systems of leaving the physical system. Sensory does speak of that, but the inner organ systems, the inner gross kind of large solid form systems, say, of eating too much fat and clogging up your arteries, right? If you change your diet, you will notice over time, over a couple of weeks and months, wow, I can breathe easier. Wow, I can move around a little easier. Wow, I don't feel so sluggish. Wow, I can think a lot clearer. I can react better. I am moving easier. I have motivation to get up and take a walk. I have that strength of sovereignty to get off my phone and stop seeking scrolling dopamine hits and go out in the real world and exercise and put forth action in my life for real and get those dopamine hits from real life instead of a screen, right? You can see the ramifications of those changes in your life, and then the momentum picks up, and then all of a sudden you're feeling great, and things that used to bog you down don't so much. So this is why it's easy to start, or it's best to start inwards, because you get that, you feel your own gratification, you feel your own admiration, and it fuels you and builds you up. And it works for light and shadow work as well. It works for owning your truth and accountability and responsibility, being true with yourself. When something irks you, when something irritates you, when something doesn't feel right, like a distortion or a lie, and you can get into it and go and seek for yourself. Find the truth of it, find the root sources of it, do the healing and clearing. You'll feel the magnificent ripple effects. And then when you go out to seek change with others, when you get in your direct life and you're dealing with your children, your partner, your mother, father, teachers, workers, bosses, any of those kind of things that you have in a day-to-day life, all of a sudden, their slip-ups, their little things, their little, I'm thinking of the word, but I can't think of it here, like their little characteristics that might annoy you, you know, their little differences and stuff. You'll find them easier to deal with. You'll find better solutions that work for both of you. You'll actually have empathy and compassion like a muscle exercised, and you'll be able to shine that light and help those others with your strong muscles in those ways. And they will feel it too, you know? You don't have to go and speak it out to others, because all of these other systems, and yeah, they're inner systems, but all of these things reflect outwards. Cymatics, your intuition, the sensories, information, light, you know, your electromagnetic radiance, the plasma pulsations that make you up and that spread out through your aura. You know, all of those kind of things. They're having conversations with the others of those systems on their own levels when you're in direct contact with people. And so there's no need for speech, really, to make an impact on others. They'll get your vibe. They'll get the feeling from you. They'll get the healing from you. You know, it's like tuning fork with truth. And you're just vibe your own light truth out with love. And that radiates out. And then it picks up others' tuning fork within them, and it helps them to radiate from inside out and feel their truth, and to help it sing out to their own tune. You know, they don't pick up your tune and sing it as well. They're not parroting and copying the note you're singing out of your truth. Your truth, your light, is sparking their truth, their light to shine in their own way and in their own note, that own specific, beautiful chord for them. And you'll appreciate it more readily when you've done that inner work for yourself, when you've appreciated all those nuanced chords that sing within your own shadow and light. And so, in hopes of keeping this video relatively short, you know, I'm going to leave that inner systems examples out there for anybody to run with and take and add or take away to and do exploring on their own. Yes, in episodes we're going to dive deeper into things. So this is the surface level of types of systems that the inner systems and outer systems are all a part of. Now, when we look at layers of exchange here, this has to do with creator consciousness and where you choose to put your attention and intention down into. All of these layers of exchange are part of infinite intelligence. They are run by source. Yeah, they're yours. And in this lifetime here, especially when we talk about the body vessel, right? You've been made up of this and given this, and this is your vessel, and that's your gift, and it is a part of you and made up of you here and now. But just like fractal source, all is from before, it's a part of Mother Earth. It will go back to her when you die. It will return to the molecules of whatever, you know, earth and soil and mushrooms and mold and fungus and bacteria, all those things, right? It will be taken away and into the next part of the cycle. But your other realms travel on and change and morph, right? And perhaps your physical body as well crystalline and changes, and just the carbon parts of it reside here in the 3D and third density. And those will take on new life after you've moved through them. That's an example of you bringing creator consciousness down into something, into a template, into a vessel or instrument for certain perspective that gives you certain lessons at certain times. And that's what the layers of exchange are all about, these different available perspectives where you can dive in and become the boss of the system, or not even become the boss really, but dive in as your creator consciousness and have a conversation with the boss of that conversation. Have a conversation with the intelligence that runs your body vessel, the creator consciousness intelligence that runs the mind's body, right? Or the creator consciousness that runs the spirit body. I broke it down into three, and this is most common, and it is a strong structural building of foundations to understand about this sacred triad of creation, sometimes called Holy Trinity, but it is this, tripod standing, three bits coming together to create something, and all are equal, have equal standing in this model. And I have done quite a few infographics and podcasts and topics on the Holy Trinity and other ways to look at it, creator consciousness. And I've talked about the math behind it with 1 + 1 = 3. And I'll link all that kind of stuff below, and I'll reshare some of those infographics on my channels for people if you're new and you haven't seen those. But there's lots of different parallels, comparisons to this truth, to this very convenient way of interpreting information, of breaking down a complex organic thing like the self into more manageable pieces so that we can understand it and work better through our lives here. And so we have our mind, we have our physical solid 3D self, we have our emotional electrical 4D self, and we have spiritual energetic 5D self. And these bodies of intelligence, these layers of exchange, have specific functions that they're responsible for at their own levels. And when you dive into each one separately, exploration is infinite. You will always find more to dissect. You can always cut it further and dive deeper if you feel called to. If there's an inkling or an irking or a need seeking there for balancing, for understanding, for working through. That's what this is all about. And when we move in through level 3 into level 4, and we start to talk about how our internal system works with our external, right? How the hourglass vortex in the middle works with the external toroidal energy of service and the outwards appearance of things. We will talk about these inner systems and how they work with the external direct world, how they work when we talk about service and when we talk about those masculine toroidal outward pouring kind of systems of exchange, right? Because every one of these three, mind, body, and spirit, have a dual role. They have their inner role and their outer role. Their inner, and so it's important to understand that and to know that we'll look at both of them. But this is just to touch on it and just to get a feel for where we're going, right? And the third portion and part will be, how those inner and external roles within your own inner systems actually speak with external systems, with others. And that will be later on. We'll get to that way later. But know that there's a reflection, a parallel mirroring of all of these through all those three worlds: inner world, direct world, and the external reflectional world. And same thing, mind, body, and spirit. Each three echo out, and they have their own divine reflections in those three worlds. And then they have their own contrasting reflection to inhabit within those worlds. And that's why we really will dive into all of these separately to clarify and make sure we can really explore what needs to be talked about within each three. But for now, let's just understand that when we talk about the physical body, we're talking about physical energy exchanges, kinetic movements, muscle memory. We're talking about force in action, physics in real life, motion, the senses, the 5 typical senses, right? Of our feeling, senses, hearing, smelling, and seeing. those frequencies that become visible or heard in the 3D realm by our 3D vessel, the receivers that we are given to pick up those exchanges that are happening on this 3D level. And the currency of the energy here on the 3D realm, right? The thing that makes most of the impact, what transactions happen with and exchange through, what has the value is time, specifically your time. What you do with your time, what you do with your body in the physical space that you're given in that time, right? So all of your interactions, anything that you can give forth by doing physically has to do with this 3D realm, the third density, and those types of lessons, those yellow ray sort of self-oriented, carnal, materially focused types of needs and desires. And so it's really no surprise the negative agenda trying to harness down into 3D and keep everything really negatively oriented would make every transaction and everything of value based on what you physically can do and the physical money that you have and that you could input and how much time you could physically get things done in, you know? So all of those kinds of transactions and exchanges have to do with this layer. And like I said, yeah, they all interact and they have communion and interactions between the three anyways. But there is value in looking just for a second at just the 3D. And we'll do that. I'll do a whole video on that. But just to know that for this, the body speaks in physicality. The body's consciousness, your physical vessel, it feels and shares energy through physical senses. And that has a lot to do with time, distance in the physical plane. Now the next body of awareness, the next layer of exchange that we can get into is emotional electrical, 4D. This has to do with thought energy exchanges. And this has to do with the logical mind. Now, as we discover and pick apart and really segregate certain things, you'll start to see and feel within yourself your own differences between the mind and the spirit and the body. Because sometimes they can really feel like all really intermingling and you can't really see the differences between them. Give yourself time. Just take these as little bits to chew on later. You don't have to go with the whole thing right now. You can be confused by it. You cannot hear the differences. You cannot see them. That's totally acceptable. And believe me, it took me, months and weeks of combing through things and inner workings and understandings and listening a lot for probably years to these different levels of consciousness within me to really start to hear their own voices and hear the different bodies between them. And the areas of work, the little worlds that get created and are only available to them. And the logical mind, the thought energy has to do with your impulses, the electrical charges that are happening. It has to do with the choices that you make, the intentions that you go into things with, the preconceived assumptions that you have, the programming, all of the bits that you have learned and tacked into the mind really are what are at the forefront of this collective consciousness, this layer. It's intangible. It's the middle ground sort of here between really being tangible and physical, being able to be witnessed and seen, like a solid thing in the world, or the sun or clouds, things that you can look up and see. And trees, they're there. You look at them, they're always there, Um, that's 3D solid. Electrical 4D emotional type of world, it is measurable with instruments, and it is totally measurable with our inner instruments, which 3D casts aside and says they're not valuable, they're not reliable, they're not real, because they're not tangible and solid. You can't actually invent and build it and then get feedback on a piece of paper for others to physically see. It's not that type of measurement. But we've created that type of measurements now because we knew inside of us these things were real. Electrical impulses are real. Thoughts are real. There's something happening in the mind, firing, that's making movements, that's interpreting things, because we knew when injuries happen to the brain, well, things go wrong on people, strange things. We have lots of knowledge points and examples, studies, and all these kinds of descriptive observations to show us, well, there's more than meets the eye here, right? And that's where the electrical body comes in, and we have more measurements. This is the in-between ground. There is some tangibility to these. You can strap on sensors and look at your heart and look at brain waves. We can see differences in them. We can make assumptions based on them, and they're slightly reliable. And that's why I like to see this as the middle ground between the spiritual, because spiritual is totally intangible. It's not meant to be touched, seen, or spoken, or heard, or anything like that. It's all that cannot be. It's not this, not this, not it, not it. It is not that, it is not that. That's all you can say about it. But anyways, the emotional, electrical, logical mind is that middle ground. And the worlds that get built around this, the exchanges that happen in here, the currency and the value and worth that's being changed and exchanged is your information processing. The power to make connections, to store memories, the power to follow instructions, the power to hear and remember, the power to use tools, to learn technical or mechanical functionings, to use the body's physicality to make thoughts into action. This is the middle ground, right? That brings down thoughts like inventions and ideas, and then we create them with energy and with real time. We put actual time dedication into that. That's where the body comes in, the 3D. But before, it's a thought thing. You might build it in your mind. You might be like Tesla and running them, all of them, very deeply in the mind here. So much so that you have all your prototypes in there, and you run a beta even in there. And then when you're able to really bring it down to solid form, it has basically no little bugs or troubleshooting necessary, because you have gone in the forefront of your mind, out explored through manyness, as many zeros as you needed to add in the thought realm here before you ever bring it down into 3D realm and create it and then try it out. But that kind of building and thinking has to be linked into imagination space to gain the ability to add zeros and gain infinite exploration in your creational space out there. You have to have connection to spirit. And if you don't, you'll be very limited in the amount of creative space that you allow yourself in the mind. Your imagination space is not limitless. It's a limited box and a cubicle that you have to work in, and that you have to come up with all your ideas inside that place. You can't take a walk. There's no outside to go refresh with the logical mind's information, with the brain's processing. It happens in there. And there's millions and trillions of wonderful systems, workings, and interactions just in this layer of the mind that are very valuable, that are logically based, and that have just to do with processing information, with algorithmic thinking, with this then that programs, with comparisons and sorting and labeling, and then projecting things, making predictions, and holding things accountable to their appearance. Though that type of conductive thinking, critical thinking, is a very, very valuable source of our energy and exchanges. And we have tons of real life business and industries that are really built and require that and depend on that. Um, and and that is sort of the currency of the logical mind. And those are the systems that you'll be involved in with the mind, you know. And you might have a very mind-based job where, you know, it's like data entry. It's super subconscious. It's not work that requires real thought. It's repetitive and mechanical. And that type of work does have value, and there is great lessons and a type of Zen flows that you can get into with that kind of thoughtless transactions. But it's also a double-edged sword, right? And how many of us are cut off from the rest and stuck in this sort of automaton, not quite AI, not quite human mode of just data entry processing and taking in and moving information, doing what we're told, and never looking outside the box, never looking inside our own self, just seeing out there and copying and following suit. Now, when we are cut off from the spirit and cut off from the heart center, which should be the boss of 4D, we find a peculiar place of the body and the mind being trapped in this sort of looping cognitive bias situation, to where the body is really important and the mind is really important, and only those systems and ways of thinking that can be reflected through those two in partnership are considered important, and the rest is cut off and castrated, you know, really like exiled, not allowed to even be thought of. You know, you're kicked out of the family kind of thing. I have no son, you know, kind of aspect to it. And that has a whole usage for the negative agenda, for shadow, and for whatever you like to look at those kind of archonic Orion groups as. The ones who want to harness and hold back change and to keep it really in 3D, where they have a lot of control and fertile ground to work with and manipulate. You can see why they have really cut and stifled any of the spiritual body. Because the spirit will always whisper into the mind and through the body and whisper its truth and sing its little chord. And like a distracted child, you know, your mind's going to want to follow it, and your body's going to go for what feels good too, you know. So that's why they make it very loud and distracting here, and they really detour anybody from wanting to go down the alleyways that look like spiritual discovery. There's a lot of distortions and manipulation that happen right at the gateway of any path that looks spiritual. They try to hijack right behind the door and lead you off on their path that circles you back around into liar loops and into shadow, instead of seeking and listening for your own truth and saying, no, I don't need your doorway, thank you. Actually, there's no door. I just go around this way and find my truth, and it's an open field I'm running through. Why am I going to go walk through the little fence corralled door you've put in an open field? Because you told me that's the way in? That is silly. But that's consenting to their mindfuckery. That's consenting to programming and saying, oh yeah, of course I'll enter through the way you've asked me to, and walking through. Because then when you do that, they see, oh, she's a follower, she's listening, you know. They know, they've got you. But they've got you in nothing anyways, because it's a wide open field that you're free to create. So even if you walk through their things, don't worry. You can shake it off. You can remove consent or revoke consent at any time you want, remove attachments and all these things, and sing to your spirit and allow them all to have conversations and speak freely, and you'll find your truth. You'll find your way out. Anyways, I've gotten off on a ramble again. The third and final body layer of exchange that I'd like to speak about, and that we will dive into in level 3, is the spiritual energetic kind of 5D body. This has to do with spiritual energy exchanges. And what are those, right? Those are kind of the cymatic, the frequencies, the vibe that you send out, right? Your heart, how you're speaking your truth, and is it aligning with the frequencies that your intentions that you have within you, or are you creating this kind of disharmonious resonance by having a certain flow inside your heart, but then speaking or acting in a different way, right? That creates a disharmonious rippling, and people sense that, and then they say, oh, there's something off about that person, or that person's lying, or not being honest, or in a lot of pain, or whatever the case might be. People will pick up on that sense, that distortion, through those layers of communication, because they're having communication with your soul, with your spirit. This is another layer, to realize that there is plenty of life on layerings. Many, many, many layers, multifaceted availability for entities and consciousness to be explored. And your spirit is having conversations all the time. And if you're not daily setting nice protective boundaries around yourself, if you are not really harnessing into faith, anchoring in love and light for your own self, for your own best good, for the highest good of all, and if you're not taking the time to do that and to have that, speak out that song every day, then you're going to notice negative attachments lingering in your shadow, because your shadow is also speaking out a song to shadowy spirit out there. And, like attracts like. And if you're not conscientious about your light and shadow and alchemy and truth within yourself, the spiritual conversations can cause a lot of disharmonious sort of interactions. So be mindful of that. And we'll get into that a lot more. And I talked a lot about that with polarity, charges, and how we can do light and shadow work to keep ourselves in an alignment that we want to be in, whether positive or negative, whether you're service to others or service to self. The information is useful to both orientations. Both orientations are useful to the path back to oneness, to the creator. They wouldn't be there and made available if the creator didn't have a purpose for them. And so whatever you're going into spiritual interactions with, having conscious awareness that you are the boss, that there is a boss of those transactions, and then learning how that feels, and stepping into that once in a while, taking stock of how that feels for yourself. What the intuition of it is. This is your imagination, right? That many people have been cut off from, or really sort of crippled themselves or scribbled over, and they don't like it anymore, But it's really time to sort of pull out the thorns and allow your inner child to get in touch with that imagination space again, and to allow your heart to open up, not judge yourself in those kind of spaces. Nobody's in there with you but you. And when you allow yourself to do that kind of work and open up, that you'll find that bigger workspace to work within, like I was talking about with creative inventions and innovations. When you have a strong open communication between the spirit and the mind consciousnesses, you're able to get into infinite imagination space and to get great ideas and to have feedback and to build and to run simulatory kind of things inside of this expansive space in your mind. You'll never run out of space or forget or lose things or anything like that, because like a muscle, like I said before, it's like a muscle, and the more you use it, the more it'll be there, and the more viable it'll be, the more tangible it'll be. And okay, so finally, the currency that the systems are working within, this layer of exchange for your spiritual body. The currency and value here is your innovation. You're thinking outside of the box. Your literal spark of creator consciousness is what creates this organic newness of thought, the popping in of differentness, a new perspective, you know. That is what you're paying with, you're interacting with, you're getting and receiving when you're doing this sort of imagination work, when you're offering out your ideas, your creations, your thoughts that, and not just thoughts, you know, I hate to use that word thoughts, but your concepts, you know. This is where it's kind of wiggly, and it takes time for everybody to pull apart the knot and find the threads of truth here, because it does, imagination and thinking can really seem like the same thing to people, especially if you've jammed them in the same box for a long time. So take time to really pull them apart, because you will notice and you will find that imagination space is different. It has to do with the crown chakra, with getting up and out of the third eye, with finding that doorway, the ladder, Willy Wonka's glass elevator, and you're out, hot air balloon, whatever, like a rope to climb up, you know, up and out, in through the observatory and into the sky, into that peace that is bigger than the self's perspective now. That is really the imagination. That's the innovation. That's your connection to source, infinite intelligence. It's that unique spark. And that is, in my opinion, especially right now where we are in the timeline, in this sort of directionality of the plane, you know, we're at this crossing point, that our most valuable resource is our imagination, our ability to think new, to create new, to do something different, to choose an option that's not set in front of you, to, you know, that is the priceless gift of aliveness, of organic uniqueness that is creator consciousness. Not every person has this, right? I'm sure you might even be one of these people, and I was one of these people for myself. I cut it off and cut it out, and I hated it, and I put it in a box to pretend it never happened for quite a while. But when I sorted through those things for myself, I found such great worth and value in allowing the openness to imagine, to think fantastically, to dream, to make believe, to make up, to make it up in your head, you know. There's a great power in that. The power is that. And this is why they cut us off from spirit first. This is why there's so much, so many signs, go the other way, this road is closed, bridge not finished, all those kind of things. Don't, you know, scary this way, no headlight, you know, whatever the road signs tell you, are specific to you. But, you know, they try to deter everybody from getting on these spiritual paths because it's uncontrollable. And we are uncontrollable. We really are. And our power is limitless. But it's not until you know that and accept that that you really tap into your power source. And so they want us all to sort of never tap into that. But yeah, I think I have rambled around everything a lot already. But yeah, these are the layers of exchange that we're going to dive into with the systems within us. They all have such beautiful sacred opposites that they can do work within and reflect and exchange energy within. So we'll talk about all of that in the videos to come. Thank you so much for joining me for this Welcome to Level 3 video. If you're looking for anything in the meantime, you can always find me directly on my website, amariespeaks.com, or over on Telegram. I definitely drop all my links to podcasts, videos, blogs, everything that's on different platforms is always fed through Telegram. So if you want to keep up with me, that's the best place. Amory Speaks over there. And yeah, I hope you're excited to hear what's to come in level 3. I'd love to hear any feedback, or if you've got things that I missed or nuances that you would have liked to input, or questions, or things that you don't like even. Love to hear them. Send me emails, always in the description, or put a comment on the platform that you're watching this on. Thank you for your audience. I truly appreciate your beautiful contribution to our collective. Thank you for witnessing mine, and I will talk to you next time.